Today is Saturday, June 30th, 2018, and we're in Marion, Ohio, visiting Grandma Imee, and what we wanted to do was just talk about the old days and catch it on video so that we can show Maria and Layla and whoever else would like to see the video in the future. Does that sound good? All right, good. So how about we start at the beginning? So maybe you can tell me about your mom and dad, and tell me about your mom and dad.
Well, when I was born, of course, we were in the Deep Depression.
What year were you born?
In 1930.
Okay.
Okay. And my mother and father lived on what they called the west end of town, which was Nye Street at 205, and I was born in that house.
Is that in Marion?
In Marion,
Oh.
Ohio, of course.
Nice.
And of course we lived there for several years. My baby sister was also born there, and of course she passed away in 2002.
What was her name?
Her name was Dolores, but we always called her Dopey.
Dopey. Okay. Yeah.
And so she really grew up to be quite a person.
Okay.
But
She was an important person in the school district.
Oh, that's nice.
But like I say, during the Depression, of course, Mother made different things.
There's your family, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes, that's my family. That's my brother Charles, Dolores, me, and Juanita was my older sister, my father Carol James, and my mother Frida Marie.
Ah, that's a nice picture. Everybody all in one.
Isn't it?
And all.
Thanks for grabbing that.
Yeah.
And so we had several pictures taken, of course,
Of course.
back then. But, and as I grew up, of course, I went to, my folks moved over onto Mound Street here in Marion.
Okay.
So that put me into kindergarten in first grade at what they called Onley Avenue School,
Okay.
which was just across the tracks from where we lived. So that was a nice advantage,
What's the one
Because-
thing that you remember the most from school when you were a kid?
and
What's the one thing that you remember the most from being a kid in school? Is there any memories
we
from
all
school?
remember our recesses.
Oh, recesses. Those are good,
'cause
yeah.
you got to jump up and down,
Oh, that's
and you
nice.
could ride the slides.
Yeah,
And who doesn't like recess?
I agree. That's a good thing to enjoy.
I'm sure Maria will like her recess.
I'm sure she
also.
will.
But thinking back, it's good they had those recesses because children do get tired of sitting.
They do. Yeah, yeah,
We also
long
did
day.
a lot of things.
yeah.
I always liked science and math. So of course, as I went on to junior high and high school, I took math, which was, of course, we took advanced math, and then we took algebra.
Yeah.
Then we went into calculus
Okay, yeah.
and all.
And did you go to the Harding High
I went
Here?
to Central Junior first.
Central Junior first? Okay.
Yes. And then at Harding High.
Harding High. What year did you graduate from Harding High?
Oh, I graduated in June of 1948.
Okay. So you got to live through World War II.
Yes, the
So-
whole war.
What do you remember from that war years?
Oh my. I can remember we wrote a lot of letters to several men.
Okay.
Juanita had a friend that was a Chinese, but he was in the American Army.
Oh.
And of course, he would come home, and not having a home of his own, Dad and Mother let him all have quilts to lay on the floor.
Oh.
And maybe we'd have 5 or 6 soldiers on the floor
No kidding. Wow.
at one time because they'd be on a quick leave.
I see.
And so, of course, that was interesting because they would tell the things that was happening.
Sure.
And, of course, it's hard to believe when you're a teenager that these are going on and how
Yeah.
much fighting.
Yeah.
Now, Juanita's husband was known as Bill Burke.
Okay.
He was French,
Okay.
and he spoke French and English, but he was in our American Army
Oh.
and all. So, of course, she did go to camp with him for a couple of years before he went
Okay.
into the Battle of the Bulge.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And they say he was captured there and spent 9 days as a prisoner before the Americans got him free.
Okay. Wow.
So, of course, I do have a few of his medals,
Really? Okay.
and I also have a few of my cousin Dale White, of where he was in.
Okay.
And he, of course, perhaps I shouldn't tell this, but he had a speech impairment, though being tongue-tied.
Oh, really?
So,
Okay.
of course, everything came out differently.
Nice.
And, of course, when he came home, he had to tell us all these stories. And he had no girlfriend, so, of course, he gave me his little things that he had taken off of German soldiers.
Oh, interesting.
Now, Lisa, when she was in school, at one time she needed to write an article about World War II.
Yeah.
So I let her have the Iron Cross
Oh, wow.
and the piece of white shirt that Dale had tore off
Huh.
of a German soldier
Those are some impressive
and
memories.
things like that.
Yeah.
And so, of course, you know, that was interesting. And it was fun to take to school because I was the only one that had those things, you know.
Yeah, those are not the kinds
And
of
of
things
course,
that are easy to find.
Dale let me have his Purple Heart to show,
Oh, okay.
and all, because he had gotten it.
Yeah.
Although he was wounded, and they had shot his one knee out. He took 6 German prisoners, and he crawled with them in front of him
Oh, wow.
back to his own lines,
Wow.
is why he got the Purple
Purple Heart.
You know.
Hmm.
So, of course, that was real something that went on,
That's intense. Yeah, wow.
you
Hmm.
know. But as the war went on, of course, as a teenager, elections meant nothing.
Of course.
I mean, we had had Roosevelt in for so many years,
Right, that's right.
and
And then it was Truman.
I think Roosevelt served 3 terms, and that's when it
Yes.
was decided.
Yes, he was the only president to do 3
That's
terms
right.
because
He's
they
the
changed
only
the rules.
president
Yeah.
in 3 straight terms.
Right.
So, of course, as a teenager, you think he's just going to be there
President forever.
He's
I remember thinking that about Ronald Reagan.
He's like our king.
Yes, that's how I felt about Ronald Reagan. I didn't even realize that the presidents change because he was elected when I was about 1.
It was true, you know.
Yeah.
Great.
And I really think the man would have went for the 4th term if he hadn't have died.
Right, yeah. So then
You know,
Truman was president whenever
Even though
you
they
graduated
had
high
a
school.
lot of talk about President Roosevelt's wife,
Yeah.
you know, Eleanor.
Eleanor.
They always claimed she was part colored, whether she was or not. Her skin was a little darker,
Yeah.
but I mean, she could have been anything.
Right. Who knows?
Who knows what she was?
So then you graduated high school in 1948. So then what happened after high school?
Well, high school went through pretty good. I
Good.
was, I took English, of course, and sciences, math, as I said. And of course, I met Charlie in my junior year
Of high school.
in high school.
Okay.
He was a senior.
Okay.
But he was working as a telegraph delivery boy.
Ah.
So it was a nice icy morning, and we were waiting on the corner by a little eatery place that we called Fred's.
Okay.
And all us kids went in for hot chocolate before school, of course. And we were waiting on my brother Chuck's girlfriend to get off of the city bus.
Okay.
And Charlie came in on his bicycle, slid on the ice, and fell at my feet.
Oh my gosh.
Actually fell at my feet.
Oh my gosh.
And he looked at me and he said, "Oh, you're the one." And I thought, gosh, what's he talking about?
That's so
But
nice.
then I wasn't quite 16, so
Okay.
I couldn't date.
Okay.
Because back then you couldn't date till you were 16.
Okay. Right.
So of course when I turned 16, then we dated.
Okay.
And then I'd get upset with him, and then I'd date another.
That's
I'd
the way
date
it
Bob
goes.
O'Brien or Bob Martin or George with the other
You were
boys.
serious about somebody too. Who was that guy you were serious about besides Dad?
Yeah.
Remember that other man? He had his
Yes.
picture.
Jesse Pores.
Jessie. I remember her
Yes.
telling about
Okay.
Jessie. It
That
her
was,
other
and
sweetheart.
I see.
of course he was Jesse Pores, and I did get maybe legally engaged to him.
Oh, okay.
He sent me rings.
Yeah.
He was in the military with my brother at Shepherd's Field
Okay.
in Texas.
Oh,
And of course he came home with Chuck and we dated
sure.
and of course he got serious and I
Yeah.
got serious with him
Yeah.
and all.
But what
And,
happened?
Well, they, of course, Chuck went to Germany, my
Okay.
brother, and Jesse was sent to the Pacific,
Oh,
and he was shot down over the Pacific.
really?
Yes.
Oh.
So, of course, there was Charlie.
Okay. Well,
Stand by.
good. That's good.
And, of course, at that time, Charlie was also in the military.
What branch?
He was in the Army.
In the Army. Okay.
Yes. He was a communication officer.
I see. Okay.
So of course he did all the radio setups and things like that.
Okay. And where, when he was in the Army, what places did he go?
Well, he was at Fort Dix first, and then he was at Fort Monmouth.
Okay.
Those were both in New Jersey.
Okay.
And then to learn to decode, he went to a camp just outside of Washington, D.C.
Interesting.
It was kind of like a secret
Sure.
camp.
I'll bet.
So, of course, we weren't allowed to. My mail went to a different camp and then delivered to him.
Interesting. Yeah. Well, I do know that ciphers and codes were a very big deal
Yes.
back in World War II.
Yes.
Sure.
And since Charlie was related to his aunt, which was half Indian
Okay.
and all, then he knew Navajo.
Oh, really?
Because his Aunt Elaine had taught him
Okay.
Spanish and Navajo along with his English
Oh,
when they lived here in Marion
okay.
and all. And of course, she went on to be the commissioner of the reservation in New Mexico.
Oh, really? Okay.
And so, of course, there's history there.
Sure.
But getting back to the military,
Yeah.
and then when he finished schooling there, he came home, and on my birthday of 1948, he gave me my engagement ring.
How did he propose?
Oh, we had been to a movie, and then, which was a Bob Hope
Yeah.
and Red Skeleton movie,
Okay.
and Bing Crosby was in it.
Oh,
So, of course, it was a comedy musical.
I see.
And then we came home, and Mother always had popcorn and pop for all of us.
Hmm.
And so Mother had spoke to Charlie, and she said to him, "Now don't stay up late, because everybody has to get up early in the morning."
Mm-hmm.
So, of course, he waited till Mom and Dad went upstairs, and then he asked me to marry him.
Oh, wow.
Of course, the next day I found out he'd already asked Mother and Dad,
I see. That was nice.
because that was really the way you did things.
Sure.
Having met his mother and father beforehand, and we had been down there several times and played euchre with them, they were well pleased.
Good.
And that was their only child.
Okay. So Charlie was an only child.
Yes.
I see.
And so that meant they were, they were giving up their only kid to
Yeah.
somebody else.
So when were you married?
So then we were engaged on my 18th birthday,
Mm-hmm.
and we got married that same year on July the 30th,
Of 1948.
1948.
How nice.
And we were married in the Methodist Church
That's great.
by Reverend Hutchison in LaRue, Ohio.
Okay.
And all. And of course it was a regular church wedding,
That's nice.
so we had a pretty good crowd.
Good.
And then we went and came back to Marion and had the reception at my mother's, which was cake and punch.
Okay.
And of course nowadays they don't do just cake and punch.
No, nowadays they go all out.
And so then, of course, we were going to go to Kenton and stay in a motel over there.
Mm-hmm.
But coming up through town, like all newlyweds did, we got a flat tire.
Oh,
So, of course, that meant we couldn't go to Kenton right then.
right.
So Charlie had left the car over across the street here
Huh.
to what was known as McDaniel's Auto Shop,
Okay.
and then came over here and got us a room. So
Oh.
we spent our wedding night here.
Right here
this
in the
building.
Harding building?
In my first apartment
How
that I
funny.
had here in that 407,
No kidding.
which was really odd
Huh.
because when my children helped me pick out the apartment, they didn't realize any of this.
No, how could they if you hadn't told them?
You
That's
know.
funny.
And it was just one of those things that was to be.
So how was it when you had just gotten married and you had your apartment, and how was life back then?
Well, we didn't really have our apartment right away
Okay.
because Charlie had to go to Japan
Oh,
right after he had a 7-day leave.
I see.
So we went from here to Kenton for a few days to what is called Indian Lake Amusement Park. We
Okay.
went over there for 2 days. And then his grandfather wasn't feeling well. So we picked up his dad and we went to his grandfather's over at Millersburg, Ohio,
I see.
to a great big farm.
Hmm.
His grandfather had roosters, and of course, at that time they didn't have any modern bathrooms.
Yeah.
It was a horrible thing for me. And of course, his great grandmother was still alive,
Okay.
which she gave me a necklace
That's nice.
and all, which was a watch
I see.
that she had gotten when she got married
Oh, wow.
and all, when she had married her first husband.
Okay.
Of course, she was married several times.
I see.
And back then, that's what women did. If your husband died or left you, you got remarried
Mm-hmm.
because women didn't work out.
That's right. I've read and
Yeah,
heard about
you just,
Took care of
if
your
this
family.
man left
Right.
you, you had another man picked out.
that. Gotta be smart about it. So then Charlie spent some time in Japan.
But it's like my mother said, I always kept 3 men on the island because one went to school with me.
Ah,
Of course, Charlie was gone.
mhm.
So I had to have somebody else to take me to the dances.
There you go.
So his name was Little Jimmy Rex.
Oh, okay.
And he was born within 2 or 3 days of me,
Oh,
but his mother could not nurse him.
oh,
And so a mother nursed both of us at the same time.
oh, interesting.
So he was almost like a brother to me.
Interesting, yeah.
But his eyes were so bad he had to wear really heavy glasses.
Oh.
So nobody really wanted to go with Jimmy. So he was always my fallback.
Oh, well, that's nice for everybody.
He and I are still talking.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he lives in Merritt Island, Florida.
Oh, how nice.
And all. And we talked last week.
That's wonderful.
And of course, he's having a rough time of it too. But then, after all, we've gotten in these late 80s.
That's good. That's
And you
good.
can't,
Whole
you
life.
know,
That is full.
and it's not everybody that makes it this far.
That's right.
So tell me about your children. I mean, obviously you had my mom, and she was your firstborn, right?
Yes.
So tell me about how things went with my mom,
Well,
Nancy.
Okay, of course, I went to Japan to meet Charlie and spend a week over there while he was on leave. Of course, he was coming home soon, and he'd been in Korea and set up communication because it was just before the conflict.
Right.
But he wasn't qualified as a veteran of the Korean affair.
I see.
And all. And of course, then he came home. We spent a few days in LaRue and Marion and Millersburg and visiting relatives, you know.
Sure.
And so then he decided he would go to college in Indiana.
Okay.
I was already enrolled in a college in Indiana.
Okay.
So he and I went both to Valparaiso.
I see.
And as long as I was just married, they let me go to college.
That's nice.
But, of course, as young married people, I did get pregnant.
That's usually what happens.
And it was Nancy. So the minute Nancy's dad knew that she was a girl,
Yeah.
and he said, "It's going to be Nancy Gale."
Okay.
Well, he wanted to spell her name Gale, and I said, "No, that is a boy's name, or that's what you call the wind."
Okay, right.
So we had a slight disagreement
That's
on it,
funny.
but we decided on the Gail.
I see.
If I would give him the Nancy, he would give me that.
And what year was that? 1951.
That would be in 1950.
51.
No, I got pregnant in 50.
Right.
Yeah.
You got pregnant in 50, and then
Yes,
mom was
see.
born in
51.
51.
Yes, see.
I see.
And all. But the minute he knew I was pregnant, he went out and bought this beautiful pink dress that he's paid an enormous amount of money for.
Okay.
Daddies always
Which,
do that.
here we are, living on $50 a month,
Oh,
in
Yeah.
a government trailer,
right.
going under a government GI loan, and him working as a janitor like at the church,
Okay.
the Methodist church,
Yeah.
to make extra money,
I see.
you know. But we hadn't our car played out, so of course we walked into town, which was like a mile. But we did that every day.
Oh,
Not being told that when you're pregnant, you're supposed to be careful. I went horseback riding.
Here.
I went roller skating.
oh.
Skated
She was
with
18,
everybody.
Yeah, you're 18,
I-
19.
Nobody
yeah.
told me anything.
Sure.
We were living with 52 trailers of GIs and their wives.
Yeah.
Nobody told me, hey, normally you don't do this. Because some of them had 2 and 3 children.
Oh, they could have mentioned things.
They
yeah.
could have told me
Yeah.
some of the things.
So
No.
Charlie was going to Valparaiso.
Yes.
And you were going to Valparaiso, and
Yeah.
then
I went to university. He went to electronics school.
I see. Okay.
Valpo Electronics School is what it was called.
Okay, I see. All right.
You know, I went to the university.
Okay.
Of course, being pregnant, they kicked me out.
Oh, okay.
Pregnant women do not go to college.
Okay.
found that out,
Okay.
you know. But at any rate, there's this professor, and he and I love to do what they call a schottische,
Okay, what's that?
which was really a fast dance,
Oh,
you know. And so they had a dance, and of course the girls from the university came over to the all-boys school
oh,
and danced, and of course we went, and everybody did. Well, his name was Bullis, and he didn't have any hair. The professor's name was.
okay.
And so, of course, Professor Bullis came to me and he says, "Do you feel like a dance tonight?" And I said, "Sure, why not? Nobody knows I'm pregnant.
Okay. Yeah.
I only put on 7 pounds the whole 9 months.
Oh my goodness.
So nobody knew, and I didn't bother telling them.
Oh.
So here I am out there dancing. You know, well, needless to say, it wasn't the best thing for me to do.
Uh-oh.
So the next day, I called my girlfriend and I said, "I'm really cramping."
Oh.
And she says, "I think you better call the doctor."
Mm-hmm.
So we called the doctor, and he said, the girl says, "Well, you know, he's in conference in Chicago, but his dad's here, so his dad will take care of you."
Oh.
Well, of course, that was in March the 7th, and it's about noon.
Oh.
The boys, one of the boys that stayed with us a lot, he had a car. His name was Briggs. He had what you call a Nash that made into a bed, the back seat did.
Okay.
So they took me to the hospital, and of course they check you, as you know,
Sure.
and all. And he says, "Well, I think we'll just keep her." So Briggs went out and he bought bubblegum cigars and balloons and all, because we were going to have this girl.
Right.
Of course, back then you never knew,
Okay.
you know, what she's having. It
Right.
was just everybody decided.
I see.
Nancy was Nancy.
Okay.
I
Yeah.
don't know what they'd done if she had
guess it
been
worked
a
out.
Nathaniel or something.
That's funny.
But at any rate, they put a mirror up on the ceiling so I could watch Nancy be born.
Oh, interesting.
And all. And Dr. Dittmer was really good about it. And I had her like at 3:15 that afternoon.
Okay.
So actually, we weren't in the hospital very long. But then, that meant I had to stay for 10 days.
Wow, that's a long
That's
time.
a long time,
That is a long time.
and all. But, and then of course we got to go home. Charlie's mother came up, and that didn't last only a couple of days, but she was a big help.
That's good.
And that was her first grandchild.
Oh.
But she was
That makes
too
sense.
young to be called Grandma.
Oh.
But Nancy could call her Goldie.
Okay.
And she would say that to Nancy.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. Charlie is still in school,
Okay.
but he's also working part-time.
Busy guy.
So this means I'm doing his homework. And Nancy's sitting on my lap.
Okay.
Of course, I'm holding her. She's learning college words and being right. Or she doesn't know all this.
Yeah.
To her, she's just words, you know.
Sure.
But I really think in the long run, it is good for children to be read to,
Yeah.
no matter what it is,
Yeah.
you know. But at any rate, Nancy grew and growed up and went, of course, to first grade. And she was in what we called progressive schooling. So instead of being in the second reader, she was in like fourth.
Okay.
And math, she was ahead of herself.
Well, that's good.
And of course, we had Penny Sue, we called her,
Yeah.
which was Beverly.
Right.
But Nancy couldn't say Beverly.
Oh,
So she says, like a new Penny, and we said, okay, she's Penny.
how funny! Like a new penny. That's where
So
that came
then
from.
she
How
got
funny.
Penny.
Huh.
And I wish she looked really at her constantly.
That's nice.
And well, then a few years down the road, of course, in the between time, Nancy and Penny and Charlie had been transferred up to the Bering Sea
Oh,
at a camp up there
really?
to set up radio communications
For a company then, or for the military?
for RCA. Can you get through?
Yes, I
Okay. He turned it off for a second till I get you.
can. Great. Okay, so you had just said that Charlie was transferred.
So I took the girls and went up there.
And where did you go? I'm sorry.
Hmm?
Where did you say that you went? I'm sorry.
And with RCA.
With RCA.
Yes.
Okay, to the Bering Sea.
Yeah,
Okay,
it was a military camp up there.
I see.
And they put in what they called the warning system.
Okay.
The early warning system.
Okay,
Because we were in a Cold War with Russia.
that makes sense. Right. Yeah.
And okay, from there, we were ordered back into North Dakota.
Okay.
And there I got a bad sinus infection.
Okay.
And the doctor said that Penny and I both needed to go to a warmer climate
Oh,
because she was asthmatic.
I see.
So he put in for a transfer, and RCA transferred him to being one of the original 18 engineers that went to Patrick Air Force Base
Where?
at Cocoa Beach,
Oh.
Florida,
Okay.
to set up Cape Canaveral.
Yeah. And what sort of things did he do there?
Sort of things there he did there. He put the telemetry in the nose cones.
Oh, wow.
He sat in the blockhouse with the red button
Huh.
as they fired off a missile. If it headed toward Miami, he pushed the red button and it would
Okay.
explode over the Atlantic Ocean.
Wow.
So he had to watch the monitor very closely
Sure.
that it didn't make a U-turn and come back
Right.
to enter
Definitely.
something.
Right.
And
Huh.
so it was really a thing.
And this is the middle 1950s.
Yes,
Okay.
we're into 52.
52. Okay.
We
Yeah.
went in September the 15th. I hated Florida.
Really?
The first 30 days we were there, it rained every day,
Okay.
which is horrible.
Yeah.
You've been in Florida, you know that
It's
it
hot.
is.
Yeah.
And that was where I finally learned that you could rain on one side of the street and not the other.
Oh.
I mean, it was Florida.
Yeah.
So of course we did live on the air base. When we first got there, we drove from North Dakota to Florida. Charlie got the flu, which meant I drove.
Oh.
I am scared of bridges.
Wow.
So I would stop at the edge of the bridge and walk across. He would drive across the bridge.
Really?
I would get back.
Do you still not like them today? Or did you eventually get okay with them?
I don't really like bridges.
Still don't like
yet
bridges. Okay.
at all.
I don't like
But
high things myself,
then we
so
get-
I can appreciate that.
Then we get down there and I'm watching the map because back then you don't have anywhere else. And it says to stay on what they call A1A.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm doing this. All of a sudden I'm hearing water lapping at my wheels.
Well,
And I'm thinking, where am I? What am I doing? And well, then I come to a bridge that's setting straight up in the air. And of course, it's got the crossbars and it's flashing.
oh,
So I do stop, and the bridge comes down and I cross it, which is kind of funny too, but we get across the bridge. And then it was really nice because it was sand on either side of the road.
okay.
And I drove right straight to the airbase gates. Of course, they checked our credentials. And I said, well, my husband was sick. So, of course, they put him in the infirmary right fast.
Hmm.
And then one of the air police took me to a motel with the girls
I see.
and all. And then we stayed in the motel until a major's apartment came empty, and we took it
Okay.
to live in. But then they discovered that since he wasn't military any longer, and all, he couldn't stay in the military hospital any longer, but he
makes
was
sense.
well enough to be home anyway.
Okay.
So we were all right with that. But we lived on the top of a dune, so the ocean would come up almost to the top of the dune
Okay.
and all. So, of course, the girls, we went out every morning and picked up shells. We made anything and everything out of shells.
Okay. I think I remember doing that when I was a child.
And then, of course, I would
myself,
make glue out of flour and water.
Okay. Yeah.
And we could color it,
Yeah.
you know. And we would make necklaces and lamps and dolls and, oh, there was anything and everything you could make with shells. But we'd go every morning and go pick up the perfect ones,
That's nice.
you know.
So then later, you had 4 more children total,
Yes.
right? So who all and when did they all come along?
Well, now, then, of course, Bruce was born in July the 27th of 1957.
Okay.
You're making me think back.
Oh, you don't have to remember all the years or anything. I just want to hear a little bit about how, this
And,
part of your life went.
And of course, Nancy and Penny were told that they could come and pick out a baby brother because they kept saying they wanted a baby brother.
Okay.
Thankfully, that happened
It worked out.
and all. And so Charlie and a nurse brought them up the back way to the nursery because they weren't old enough to visit.
Okay.
So they had wrapped this one baby in blue and the rest of them in pink.
Oh,
So the girls picked out Bruce, of course.
funny.
And then they called him Bruce Allen.
Okay.
The girls named him.
Oh, really?
Nice. Of course, they hated it later. They were disgusted with him because he was very obnoxious when he was little.
Oh, well, little
I
boys,
mean,
that's the
He
way
was
little
his
boys are.
own person,
Yeah.
and the girls wanted to baby him, and he
Oh.
was not being a baby.
He was independent.
He was very independent. In fact, he was potty trained by 10 months old,
That's quick.
and he threw his bottle away when he was 8 months old.
That's quick.
Of course, I was pregnant for Charlene at that time, that he
Oh.
threw his bottle away.
Okay, so Charlene came pretty quick.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, of course, then I had Char at 26 weeks.
Right. Now, Char was the one that was born premature.
Yes.
So, how did
So,
that go?
of course, not thinking back then
Mhm.
that she would live,
Oh,
why give her a birth certificate? I mean,
Hmm.
why do all this paperwork?
Hmm.
That's what they're thinking.
it's early. Yeah.
So the first
Yeah.
pediatrician, he would not do what I wanted done.
Hmm.
I had read in a magazine that Mayo Clinic had taken these preemies and put nose tubes in
Yeah.
and fed them through a nose tube,
Maria did that, actually.
And,
Our daughter.
and that fed them.
Yeah.
So I called a doctor that had just retired, and I said to Dr. Morton, will you do it just for me?
Yeah.
And he says, well, I've never done that, but yes, just for you, I'll do it.
Okay.
So he came to the hospital and signed on
Huh.
and took care of Charlene.
Wow. So, I mean, that was some of the first
And,
times probably
so
outside of the
then-
clinic that they
But
were
he
doing
didn't
that.
weigh her or anything. When she was 10 days old, they gave her 2 ounces of blood.
Hmm.
And all. And then, of course, when she was 14 days old, they gave her 2 more ounces.
Okay.
and but they fed her through the nose for several weeks.
Yeah.
Well, then Nancy and Penny took what they called a preemie nipple that we put on our bottle,
Yeah.
and they would chew on them until they got the nipples soft enough
Oh,
that Char, with you kind of helping, it could get the milk through the
I see.
nipple then.
Okay.
I know this all sounds odd,
No, this is a very interesting part of your story, actually.
and all, but Char being a determined child, and she's always been, she progressed right on schedule, more or less, and whatever, by the time she was a year old, whatever Bruce could do, she could do better. And she would let him know she was better than him.
Oh,
They were
that's
only
funny.
11 months apart.
She would,
That's close.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's
yes,
close.
she would go and put her hands on his shoulder and take him out of his little police pedal car
Oh, how
I
funny.
remember that
and take
part.
his car away from him
How funny.
and all. And of course, she didn't like the diapers either, so she took them off. And I mean, I didn't care. I never had two babies in diapers at the same time,
I see.
which
Which they weren't paper in those days. They were cloth.
Oh,
and you had
a lot
to
more
clean
work.
them.
Yeah.
and but Char did progress really good. But it was because she had two sisters
Yeah.
that instead of playing with doll babies, they had Char.
Yeah.
And they took their turns feeding her every 2 hours.
That's really nice. Yeah.
We also had taken in a collie, full-blooded collie dog. But this mother couldn't feed that many pups, so we took it for ours.
Oh.
So the girls would give it the leftover formula and the baby food
What was that dog's name?
and Lassie.
Lady.
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 How nice.
Yeah, Lady
She looked
was,
like
you know,
Lassie, but we called her Lady.
she would
Oh.
eat everything.
Yeah, she would.
I mean, the girls would give her ice cream, onions, anything, and that dog would eat it.
And so you were still living in Florida all this whole time?
Yes.
Okay. So
You
then,
know,
so
so
then what
then-
happened next?
Well, we had, before I had Charlie, we had moved into, on over to Sarasota.
Okay.
Charlie had went with research.
Hmm.
And all, because his memory was gone.
Hmm.
But we could teach him enough that he could still do part of the research.
Okay. Had something happened?
He had a brain concussion,
Oh, really? I
and
see.
all. We had a big party. We were always having big parties. And all,
Everybody was
and
real social in Florida in those days.
and,
it was
uh,
amazing.
Really? Hmm.
yep. And the secretary, which her name was Kim, and Ken and him were dancing a jitterbug, and they both fell.
Oh, my.
She hurt her back, and he hurt his head.
Oh, my.
So, of course, he had a bad concussion,
I see.
which did affect him.
Hmm.
And, but getting back to his secretary, she was a wonderful girl.
Hmm.
She had escaped from Germany with her mother.
Really?
They had escaped through woods and all with only their jewelry,
No kidding.
of which they had paid people to hide them
Yeah.
with the jewels
Wow.
and all. So her story was really interesting.
That is interesting, yeah.
And all. But Charlie liked her. And of course, I thought when he first hired her, it was a boy. So he had called and he said, "Can I bring Ken home for lunch today?"
Oh.
And I said, "Oh, yeah, bring him." Well, he turned out to be a girl.
Oh, how funny.
I think her real name was
Yeah,
Kennedy.
but-
I remember hearing.
But
Oh,
she
Kennedy.
was a beautiful girl.
I see.
I still have pictures of her with him
Ah.
and the rest of his office group.
That's nice. Yeah, that's nice.
and of course, with having had the 6 children, I decided maybe if we came back to Ohio.
But real quick, before we come
It
back
would-
to Ohio, can you tell me about the last 2 children?
Oh, oh, about our Tammy.
Yeah, and then
Yeah.
Jeff.
Well, Tammy, of course, came along soon after Charlene
Okay.
and all. And, of course, I had Bruce, and then I had Char before his first birthday.
Huh.
I brought her home from the hospital on his first birthday.
Wow. Yeah.
And all. And so, which made him a really a good birthday present. He
That
thought.
is.
Later on he didn't, but I mean, at that time he did. You know,
Yeah.
but now they were born in Sarasota.
Okay. Jeff too?
Jeff was born in Sarasota also.
Okay.
Bruce was born in Rockledge, wasn't he?
Yep.
Rockledge,
Okay.
over by Colton.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
what
in
year
Rockledge.
what year was Jeff born?
Rockledge was a suburb of what they called Cocoa
Okay. Yeah.
and all. And if you remember the road going to Rockledge Hospital, at that time, we had live monkeys that jumped across, and we had to keep our windows rolled up
Oh my.
because the monkeys would jump in your car.
Oh my goodness.
And I was scared to death they would bite one of us.
I would be too.
And because they were wild.
Yeah.
But I mean, you go back to 51, 52, it was still wild down there.
I believe it.
If you didn't like somebody, you just knocked them off into the river and the crocodiles got them. I mean,
The crazy land of Florida.
you just,
So then after Jeff was born, then you moved back to Ohio?
yes,
Okay, so when did you move back to Ohio?
1965,
Okay, and what made you decide to come back?
because Charlie's memory was gone.
Okay.
And I thought that, and I couldn't trust him.
Mm.
Because he knew he had a pilot's license. And one day he and a friend, the friend not really knowing how bad he was, they decided to go to Havana, Cuba
Oh my.
for a ball game.
Huh.
Well, then I had to make sure he got his passport over there to get him back over to the States.
Especially in the 60s or late
Yes.
50s.
Yeah, because
Definitely.
back then, you see, private air pilots were transporting guns and ammunition to Cuba.
Right. It was a
And,
tense
and
place
of
in the
course-
50s and 60s.
Where we lived at was a good jumping place.
It would be.
You know, so
Yeah.
you just, yeah, it was really a touchy thing.
I'll bet.
But if I sent him to the store, I would send one of the girls with him
Okay.
because he'd get store and wouldn't know what he wanted anyway. So, but we came back to Ohio in June of '65.
Okay.
My father was dying of cancer
Uh,
and all, and I thought it was a good time. Maybe that would give him something. So we taught him to drive, and that was about it. And
okay.
of course, with an amnesia person, you never know how far to go with memory
Mm.
and all. So we did the best we could do with him. But in the meantime, well, his mother and father just thought at times that he would made it up, that he couldn't remember it
Oh.
and anything. They just couldn't understand that part.
I see.
A lot of people back then didn't understand that you could have amnesia
I see, yeah.
and all. But at any rate, Nancy and Penny was in junior high. They had already had typing and in different subjects that they had to repeat up here because they didn't have
Teach 'em as
Okay.
Florida, they teach us
progressive
each on
schooling
I see.
here,
Okay. Different areas of the country.
you know. And so I can remember one day I went to the Dairy Queen with the younger children, and who's in line but Penny Sue? she's supposed to be in school.
Oh no!
Well, needless to say, her and her younger brothers and sisters all took her back to school. She never skipped again.
Well, good. I'm glad you caught her. It's always good to get back
It
in school.
really is kind of embarrassing.
That is funny, though. That is
Nancy
funny.
never skipped school.
I
And
always
or
followed
tried.
Mom was
that
a
I
good
ever
student,
caught
I'm
her.
sure.
Whatever
That
they
I
did,
ever
I did.
caught
It's
her.
that firstborn
never
rule
skipped.
following
Yeah.
mentality. That's good.
Firstborn
At
always
any
does what
rate.
they're supposed to.
But then, of course, the girls did their high school works, and Nancy was, I don't know, she couldn't have been over 15 when she wanted to go to a church camp.
That's right.
And my mother was a deacon
Okay.
at the church. And of
Which
course,
church was it?
It was a Pentecostal church on Farming Street.
Okay.
It was
But
the
my
first
mother
one.
was a deacon over there. And she says, I don't really think it would hurt Nancy to go.
Yeah.
And guess
And
who the
Nancy
pastors
wanted to
were?
go.
Who?
Lavina Foose and her husband,
And all.
Reverend Foose and Mrs.
Oh.
Foose.
Yes.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yes.
They
What
were
a
my
funny
pastors.
connection. Okay.
And Nancy had kind of went with the Foose boy there.
No,
Once-
that was a Steiner boy I dated.
Oh, was that it?
before the Fooses.
At any rate, you know,
Okay.
the Fooses and mother-in-law were real friendly.
I see.
So
And
everybody
just so I understand,
thought,
this is Don Foose's
Mother.
mother.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
They were pastors in the Marion.
Change this real quick, and we'll catch this part of the story over here.
They were pastors in the Marion. They were pastors in the Marion Foursquare Church.
Oh.
And so, Mom and Grandpa had a big fight because we all lived together.
Yes.
My grandfather said I was much too young to go away to Canada to camp.
Oh.
And my mom, because Grandma was a deacon and we knew the pastors pretty well, Mom said, sorry, Dad, I'm letting her go. She's my daughter.
Okay.
And there was a big fight. I remember the big fight.
Oh, wow.
yeah, we had a big fuss,
It was,
yes.
yeah.
I think I'm going to have a hunch that I'm glad that Grandma won that debate.
Yeah.
'Cause what happened when you went to church camp?
So then I went to church camp with them, and that was when I was 15, and I saw Dad,
Oh.
and people were chasing him into the lake at the camp because he had worn a white shirt, long sleeve, and a tie. Why, I don't know, he was dressed up at camp. But everybody chased him because he was a goofball, and they thought it was fun, and they were cutting his tie
Oh,
and threw him in the lake.
yeah.
And when I saw him, I'm like, wow, I like him. And so I took his picture.
Oh,
But he was like hanging around with this other girl that year
yeah,
because I was 15.
sure.
And so then it was the next year when I was 16, he wasn't hanging around that girl anymore. And I remembered him, and he remembered me,
How
and
funny.
we were dating at camp.
Well, I'll tell you what, I'd love to hear that story.
Yeah, that's
and what
another
we'll
day.
do is another day, we're going to catch that whole
Yes.
story.
Come on, Nancy.
Yeah,
But-
no, it's still your turn today.
Today, we're talking with Grandma.
Okay,
So,
so now my daughter Nancy has met her future husband.
Yeah.
Of course, I don't know this at
Okay.
that
We
time.
don't any of us know.
right.
But Lester decides that he will come down
Hmm.
and all. And of course he does. Well, Jerry Reiser is dating my younger daughter, Penny Sue.
Okay.
So if Lester's going to be there, then Jerry must be there.
Yeah.
And so they set up tents in the yard. Jeff is very young and all.
Probably 6.
So of course he's going to sleep with one of the boys. Well, then he goes to one tent and then the other, and then he's finally back in the house.
Okay.
Mosquitoes aren't that great.
Yeah.
And, but boys don't sleep in the same house girlfriends are.
Right. Right.
I mean, this just isn't done.
That's good.
You know. So the boys, every time they would come to visit the girls, they would set up tents.
How nice.
And Jerry's mother would invite Lester down to her house every so often.
Because Jerry was from Marion
And
Okay.
Lester may remember some of that, do you?
Yes.
Do you remember Carol Reiser? Oh, she was very perturbed about anybody going into her kitchen.
Yes, and I remember that particular story because she was upset with me that I would like babysit her in her house,
Mhm.
and I was being nice.
He would sit in the kitchen
Yeah.
and talk to her while she made food.
Yes.
Yes.
And he thought he was being friendly because he did that with his own mother.
Yeah.
But
Mhm.
she didn't want anybody in her kitchen.
No.
That was
At
that was
all.
her domain.
I
She
see.
She
was
was really
really
bad when Leslie
something
came.
else.
So that's when he started spending every other Saturday night, Friday night, and Saturday night with the Fooses at the church parsonage.
Yes.
Okay.
Mhm.
So they,
And
all the connections
so
got
that-
made.
Yeah.
Yeah, because the Fooses were really, you know,
Heather's.
of course, Mother and Dad always had what they called the Easter sunrise service.
Okay.
Dad and Mother cooked all kinds of breakfast for everybody to come, and they would set up several picnic tables they'd borrow from the neighbors, and serve sunrise breakfast.
That's nice.
And of course, Mrs. Foose may remember about
Probably.
some of that.
Probably.
And at that time, remember, Grandpa, my dad had to tear down the barn
Mhm.
and donated the wood to the church, and they built the reception room on
Reception room.
with the
Oh,
lumber from the barn.
oh nice.
And well, we had neighbors that had two girls, and those girls complained that there might be a man go in there and try to rape them.
Oh my.
So, of course, Dad says, well, then the barn must come down.
Mm.
He wasn't going to have anybody worrying about it.
I can appreciate that.
Of course, our children were having fun swinging from ropes and out the window, and, but
He took it seriously.
Did it? Okay.
Dad, of course, said, no, the barn comes down, and that's why we had that big concrete place in the backyard.
Okay.
As you remember, you've skated on it.
I remember. Yeah.
Played basketball there even.
Yeah.
Yeah. And but at any rate, then Lester would come down and he would take Nancy. She put on a beautiful formal, and they went to, I believe it was Mount Vernon,
Yeah.
to a dance
Okay.
and it was at a church camp, was it?
Maybe it was our church prom.
Okay.
Was it a church prom?
Yeah.
It was something dressy.
Yes.
Yeah.
And of course, he had on those cufflinks,
Yeah.
That's nice.
and he really was, he was just it. And he was a nice-looking young man.
That's good.
Yes.
And so, of course, then Marie and I met each other,
Yeah.
which is your grandmother.
Yeah.
And of course, her husband had been dead for several years. And Marie and I got talking about her getting remarried.
Oh.
And she said, well, she was waiting on some woman to die. And then she was going to marry him.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And she
Otto
said, when I marry Otto, she says, I want you to walk behind me with one rose. I didn't do
Oh.
it, but I mean, it was just conversation.
Sure. Yeah.
Well, at any rate, she comes down and we meet each other.
Yeah.
And of course, the kids have to have a sign for them to get married because they weren't old enough.
We weren't 21 yet.
Or you had to be 21 back then.
21.
Yeah.
Okay. And
Yeah.
you and Marie both signed though.
Yeah. So we had to go to the courthouse and sign the papers.
And what year was that?
70, because we got married in August of 70.
1970.
It would have
Okay.
been probably the last of June or the 1st of July.
Right, because we got married in August.
It
Okay,
was.
sure, yeah.
It was probably July or after the 4th.
Yeah.
And Marie you came down.
I think you had a 3-day waiting period, so
Yeah.
you had to get your license, and then you
And then
wait
it
3
wa-
days,
Oh.
and then you could marry. But
Yeah.
ours, we had
And
4
all.
days than that.
That's
And
nice.
of course, Nancy wanted everything just special, of course.
Of course.
So Mrs. Bose and I worked several days getting the right shade of orange for her ice cream and things that you have.
Sure.
Her grandmother made her wedding gown and
Oh.
all the bridesmaids' dresses, her and Aldi Bird. And it
Was that Goldie, you mean, that made the gown? Okay.
She was
How
already
nice.
in the wedding
Yeah.
gown business.
Oh, how nice.
And all. So of course all of that was done, and then we transported the cake up. And Lester, something happened with the icing.
It's too hot.
Yeah, it was
And
hot in
something.
August.
At any rate, we had to get someone to come in and fix the cake.
Oh my
Patch the
goodness.
cake up, which I never
Because
knew.
we
They never
knew
told me.
Nancy would be in tears if
Yes,
she
they
said.
never told me.
That's a good thing to do.
Yeah.
And what city
But
was
Marie being without
Yes.
that?
a,
Okay.
without having a husband, she had said, since she was in charge of the night before dinner,
Mm-hmm.
it would be all right if we had sloppy joes and things like that, and I thought it was good.
Sure.
So that's what she made,
That's nice.
which was a good thing,
It was nice.
because back then things were different.
Yeah.
We could do things
It was
like
held
that.
in the
Nowadays,
church.
it's like, oh my goodness. I could just see Maria in her wedding gown and all the things it's going to be.
I'm sure. I'm sure.
And
So, what's your favorite memory from Lester and Nancy's wedding?
that's really hard to say because I think we had all the girls and the boys all lined up and
Church.
Everybody
Yep.
was there.
and Charlie was on his toes.
Yep.
He didn't have to go out for a cigarette or anything.
Walked me down the aisle.
nice.
Put a penny in my shoe for good luck.
Yeah.
Yeah, and all, and of course I think Jerry and him went out and decorated the car up.
Oh, did they?
Yeah,
Terrible.
they,
That
And
was
then
bad.
Lester's sisters, I think, put Jello in the bathtub.
no, that was not, that was done by Jerry.
Oh.
That was Jerry too.
Yes.
Was that Jerry
Did
too?
That was
pranks
Jerry.
on us.
Ah,
And
That was common in those days.
I see.
at any rate, they really did the kids up.
Yeah.
I see.
They did
And,
the family
It
And
took
of
us
car.
like
course-
2 hours to clean the car before we could start our honeymoon because we were just driving.
Oh, my
you know,
goodness.
to Florida.
See, that was in 1970,
Yeah.
and of course I had a brand new granddaughter. She was
Julie.
born in April.
Oh.
So, of course, that was good because I got to hold her.
Was she your first granddaughter?
Yeah,
Julie?
Julie.
Okay.
And
And now you have a lot of grandchildren. I mean, how many grandchildren do you have now?
I think there's only 12 grandchildren.
Okay. I've seen some
Yeah.
family trees. Like,
But
if you
then
include
I've
all
got
the
19.
children and grandchildren,
It's
great
great-grandchildren.
grandchildren.
It's the great grandchildren.
How about how many?
Well, with
Because that'd be Maria's generation.
yeah.
Yes.
See, we've got with
Well,
El-
there's a whole
Ellie.
bunch of them there.
I think
Nancy.
Ellie's the 19th.
19th. Wow.
And
That's a lot. That's
if we
great.
count the 2 adopted ones.
Okay. Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's wonderful.
See,
So,
so
what
I
about this-
have 2 adopted
yeah.
great grandchildren
And who are they?
Sammy's children.
Oh, right.
and
of
2
course.
step grandsons.
Okay.
And my one great grandson is married and lives in Indiana and has a daughter named Ellie.
Yeah.
And she's a year old now.
That's
So
great.
she'll be 2 in January.
Oh,
No, February the 15th.
okay.
Maria will be 2 in January,
January.
the 13th.
On the 13th, that's absolutely right. Yeah.
So I mean.
So I didn't mean to derail your whole story there with jumping to grandchildren, but maybe tell me about like the 70s or the 80s or the 90s. I mean, what are some things you remember from those eras? Because that's when I knew you, was especially in the 80s.
Well,
Yeah,
Tom
you
was
did a
born.
lot in the 80s. didn't you?
Absolutely. I remember when we went down to Florida, for example, in the 1980s. Our family had a big green van.
Yes.
And we would drive because Mom and Dad were both teachers.
Yes.
And so we would drive down to Florida and you would go with us.
Yes.
I mean, do you remember any of those trips?
A lot of. You were one that got sick in the car if you had to sit in the back seat. Lisa could not be nursed in the front.
Oh,
She
really?
would get sick.
Oh,
She had to be nursed in the back seat.
Yeah.
that's interesting.
So that meant I sat in the front seat with you.
Those were the days when there were no car seats like
Yeah,
there are
sure.
nowadays.
Yeah.
I remember one time it broke down
Yep.
and all, and the man would not take traveler's checks or anything.
Hmm.
I always travel with cash.
Okay.
So, of course, I gave them cash, and then they gave me back my money.
I
It was
see.
like in the middle of the mountains.
Oh, my
You
goodness.
know, I always paid everything in cash.
Oh, my goodness.
But we decided we're going to go to Disneyland.
Okay.
Lester and I decided, well, Nancy and him was going to listen to a speech, and then we get free tickets.
Oh, yeah.
I think I even remember this.
Nancy refuses to go.
I hated those things.
Didn't you get like a computer or
She
something?
says, I can't say no.
They're
And I
so
said,
strong.
so
Yeah.
Lester and I go to the speech.
How did it
we
go?
get our free tickets.
Oh, this is how you got the tickets to Disney World.
Yeah.
And,
I see.
You had to
and
listen
you
to a
and I
speech.
decided we'd go through what they called Epcot.
Yes. Yeah. The future.
We
land.
sat on a bench and they take us through Dinosaur Land. And
Nice.
I mean, we just keep right on moving.
That's so nice.
And we're enjoying it very much.
Yeah.
They're busy with Lisa, of course.
Of course.
You know, and all. So, but it was a fun time.
It was fun.
I
You
remember
know.
we would go to the Caravel ice cream.
Yes.
And we would also often go to a seafood restaurant
right
and
next
eat
door.
Right
shrimp.
next door.
Right
Those
next
are some of the
door.
things that I remember from those trips. And
And what was the
And then
place we
one
used to
trip-
stay?
We went. Lisa demanded that we stay in a penthouse.
oh my goodness.
Remember that?
I remember.
And
she
he
had
had-
some ideas of her own.
He had
sometimes.
trouble finding us a penthouse, but he found us a penthouse.
Penthouse in Cocoa Beach?
You know.
No, that was
Yeah, it was
Pennsylvania.
simply-
Oh,
Sometime
in
we went to
Pennsylvania. Okay.
Pennsylvania.
But and of course we went to Silver Springs.
Yeah.
Oh, that's a
that
nice
was
place.
fun.
Yeah.
Silver Springs, and you and of course Lisa both enjoyed watching the fish because it was a glass bottom boat we rode
That's nice. Yeah.
and all, and of course the fish was underneath there and,
Yeah.
and all, and there they had what they called you people had your own space with 2 rooms,
Okay.
Yeah.
and I had what they called the mother-in-law room.
Yeah.
Perfect.
And it
Off
was
to
up
the side.
high. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah,
It was real
You know.
nice.
that's great. Yeah.
and because a lot of times I just stayed in the room with them.
Sure.
You
Yeah.
know,
None of us had any
and
money.
Yeah, that's nice.
because all we did was just
Go to the beach.
go
Yeah.
to the beach.
We would watch the space shuttle
Oh yeah.
launch.
what's the space
Yeah.
shuttle?
Whenever there was a space shuttle,
Yeah,
we'd go
well,
outside
yeah.
and watch
Yeah,
that.
we used to go and watch all the space shuttles
Oh,
shoot off.
anytime.
That was fun. Yeah, that was fun.
That was a different.
Always got
Like-
kites, always got marbles, always got beach toys,
Yeah.
Good
little
times.
surfboards,
Yeah.
rented from Ron John's.
But yeah, it was a fun time, and in
Those were good days.
about 23 years ago, we were down there, and it was around Easter time and my birthday,
Hmm.
and you and Lisa and I all got Easter baskets.
Hmm.
You know, and Lester and I decided we would go get something to drink at the bar. And Nancy about had a fit because we got Lisa a Shirley Temple, and she was sure we got her
Oh,
something.
something else, something more exciting. That's funny.
But none of us was drinking at that time. But we really
I was
had
pretty
her
uptight
going.
as a parent.
Nothing wrong with that.
Uptight.
She was a good
And then,
parent.
of course, I can remember Lisa chasing you with that crab.
I remember that as well.
Oh,
I'm
yeah.
sure she
You know.
does too.
Oh
I
You
yes.
know, it was
recall
really
that
a
event.
hard time for you.
Yeah, I didn't
But she
like that.
really enjoyed.
She enjoys
Teasing.
scaring
She's gonna like
you.
that part of this video, I'm sure, because I think even she
She
remembers
teases,
that.
you know,
Yes,
she was a
yes.
tease.
I do recall that, and it was genuinely scary.
But she
You
did
know.
start out meaning to scare you.
But,
You were just at an age where you
Didn't like crabs chasing me.
right. You were
Yeah.
probably 6 and she was probably 2.
And then,
Crabs are dangerous, just for the record. I mean, they have pinchers. So, I mean, I don't think it's irrational.
I think it was dead. That's a problem.
but of
They could
course,
still maybe flick. Who knows? In
but,
any event, let's move along.
yes.
So,
but you know, a trip to Florida, you always had to go to Ron John's.
that's right,
Yes.
Ron Johns.
We had to get the boards there.
Yeah.
That's right.
We would rent a board.
And I would go surfing.
And yes,
Get a
and
T-shirt.
we had
Yep.
to have T-shirts there every year.
That's right. I remember
I
that.
mean, Ron John's had to
Yeah.
be.
Yeah,
I don't know whether it's still there or not.
Yeah, I believe
I think
it
it's
is.
gotten bigger.
Yeah.
Is
It's
it?
quite
yeah.
big now. Yeah,
Well, it was just a little shack.
it was.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
In
gotten
the
pretty big
beginning,
now.
when we
Yeah.
first got
I think they
down
have a
there.
resort, a whole resort now.
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
I guess everybody liked going to Ron John's.
Yes.
Yeah, well, if you went to Cocoa Beach and you didn't go to Ron John, you
You
haven't
weren't
been
there.
anywhere.
I agree.
Yeah.
Yep.
You know, and the little ice cream store up there on the
Oh,
causeway.
that
Oh,
caused
right.
That's the Caravel.
The Caravel.
Caravel.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yep.
see.
So how about these days? So, how's life these days? What's things, or what are you doing these days?
I still play euchre and other games. I really enjoy going to the Palace Theater to the concerts
That's
and the
nice.
different movies. Next week I'm going over to see the Newsies,
Oh, good.
and it should be good.
That's nice.
And of course, then Monday I'm going to the Marion County Fair,
Oh, good.
and I'm going to go out there in time to watch the horses race.
Oh, that'll be fun.
And then I'm going to the senior citizen building, which is air conditioned.
It's going to be hot
You know,
next week,
and,
so
of
that's
course
a good
there
idea.
They have live music, and then they have bingo games and different things to do.
That's nice. That's nice.
So I'll be going there,
good.
and
The legend continues.
Yeah.
Just keeps on going. Well, Graham, I really appreciate the opportunity to have this conversation with you. Thanks for the recording. Is there anything that you'd like to kind of say that, you know, maybe Maria might be watching this video one day, or Layla, or any of your 19 great-grandkids, or anybody else? Is there anything you'd like to say to the next generation?
oh, just to be happy and enjoy life each day.
That's great.